What if the woman who breaks you down with a smile, steals your voice with kindness, and erodes your confidence while calling it love isn't the villain in anyone else's story but yours? You know, when we talk about narcissism, most people picture the classic, loud, arrogant showboat, someone who's constantly talking about themselves, walking into a room like they own it, and demanding all the attention. And that's not wrong, but it's not the whole picture. Narcissism doesn't always wear a flashing neon sign. Sometimes it shows up dressed in charm, with a soft voice and a sympathetic smile. And this is especially true when we're talking about female narcissists. It's not that women can't be overtly narcissistic. They absolutely can, but female narcissism often plays out differently. It's more subtle, more socially acceptable, and that makes it harder to spot. Because culturally, we expect women to be nurturing, empathetic, caring. We're taught to see a woman who's in pain or emotional or beautiful or successful and not question it. So when narcissistic traits start showing up in a woman, they can blend into those expectations in a way that makes people second guess their own instincts. Think about this. A woman who constantly centers herself in every conversation, but does it by sharing stories of how much she's suffered. A woman who appears deeply empathetic, but somehow always redirects your pain back to how it affects her. A woman who seems to support her friends, but there's always a quiet undercurrent of competition, like she's keeping score. That's the kind of narcissism we don't talk about enough. And it's the kind that leaves people confused, doubting themselves, wondering if they're being too sensitive or unfair or dramatic. The reality is, female narcissists are often emotionally intelligent. That's part of what makes the behavior so hard to identify. They understand what people want to hear. They know how to mirror your emotions, how to draw you in, how to make you feel like you're special, seen, chosen. And that's intoxicating until it isn't. Because once you're close, the mask starts to slip. You notice how everything seems to revolve around them, how your needs never really get met, how somehow you're always the one apologizing, always the one feeling off balance, like you can't quite put your finger on what's wrong, but something is wrong. This is why it's so important to recognize that narcissism isn't about gender, it's about behavior. And when we overlook the signs just because they don't fit a stereotype, we open the door to relationships that are emotionally manipulative, even toxic. Now, I'm not saying every emotionally expressive or confident woman is a narcissist, not at all. What I am saying is that narcissism, when it shows up in women, often cloaks itself in socially reinforced behaviors, like being the helper, the victim, or the perfect one. And that makes it especially hard to name, to call out, and to walk away from. And here's something else we don't talk about enough. When a female narcissist causes harm, especially to other women, the victim often feels silenced because calling out another woman can feel like betrayal, especially if that woman has positioned herself as a feminist, a survivor, or a champion of other women. That's the complexity we have to be willing to look at, not because we want to tear anyone down, but because we want to see things clearly, because clarity is kindness. And because accountability is not cruelty, it's healing. So when we start to really examine what narcissism looks like in women, we need to look beyond the surface. It's not about labels or diagnoses, it's about patterns. Is there a consistent disregard for other people's feelings, masked as honesty? Is there a need to be the center of attention, even in someone else's crisis? Is there a habit of rewriting reality, twisting facts, or denying things that were said or done? Those are the signs that matter. Those are the moments where we can pause, trust our gut, and say, wait a minute, this doesn't feel right. Because that's what this is really about. It's not about judging someone for being flawed. We're all flawed. It's about understanding when someone's behavior is not just flawed, but harmful, and knowing that you have every right to name it, protect yourself from it, and walk away from it, even if no one else sees what you see, even if it's subtle, even if it's coming from someone the world calls sweet or strong or so nice. That's the start of seeing clearly. That's the beginning of getting free. We don't always talk about charm as a weapon. We're more likely to associate it with something harmless, maybe even a little flattering. But charm, when used strategically, can be one of the most powerful tools in the narcissist playbook. And when we're talking about female narcissists, that charm often doesn't look like the smooth talking, grandstanding version we see in movies. It's softer, more subtle. But don't let that fool you. It's every bit as calculated. Female narcissists often master the art of appearing effortlessly warm, attentive, even magnetic. You meet her and she makes you feel seen in a way that's rare. She leans in when you talk. She remembers little things you said. She makes you laugh. There's an energy about her that draws people in, friends, coworkers, strangers, everyone. And it's not just about being friendly, it's about controlling how people perceive her. That charm is not for connection, it's for positioning. Because what's really happening behind the scenes is often a kind of emotional manipulation. That magnetic pull, it sets the stage, it lowers defenses, it creates an image of being kind, compassionate, confident, even selfless. And once people are drawn in, once they've bought into that image, she can start to mold the narrative around her. She becomes untouchable in a way. It becomes hard to challenge her, hard to see through the cracks, because everyone around her is already under the spell. And here's the tricky part. This charm doesn't feel aggressive. It doesn't feel dangerous. It feels good. That's why it works. You trust her. You want her approval. You feel lucky to be in her circle. And if something starts to feel off, it's easy to dismiss it. She's so nice, right? So confident, so inspiring. That's how the gaslighting starts, not with denial, but with doubt. Your doubt, I've seen it happen in personal relationships and friendships, at work. A woman who knows exactly how to walk into a room and take command of it without ever raising her voice. She knows who to compliment, when to offer a heartfelt story, when to drop just enough vulnerability to seem relatable. And then later, when things get messy, when someone sets a boundary or starts to question her, it's that same charm that makes people second guess the conflict. She would never do that. You must have misunderstood her. She's been through so much. Charm becomes a shield, and it also becomes a weapon, because once she has your trust, she can start using it. Maybe it's small at first, asking for favors, needing special treatment, always having a good reason why the rules don't apply to her. But over time, the pattern becomes clearer. You start to notice that things only really work when she's in control, that her charm has an expiration date, right around the moment you stop playing along. And when you do, the shift can be jarring. What once felt like warmth becomes coldness. What once felt like interest becomes distance, or worse, retaliation. Suddenly you're no longer in the glow of her charm, and you realize how much of your own power you handed over just to stay there. That's what makes it so difficult. It's not just that she manipulated people, it's that she made you doubt yourself for even noticing what her power is. And this is where people get stuck, because female narcissists often maintain that charming persona in public. The people closest to them are left feeling isolated. If you speak up, others might not believe you. If you call out the manipulation, it's easy for her to flip the script, to act wounded, shocked, betrayed. She'll double down on the charm with everyone else, painting you as the problem. And suddenly, the truth becomes so tangled that it feels safer to stay silent. But I want to say something here that might be hard to hear, but important. Charm is not the same thing as character. Charm is easy. It can be turned on like a switch. But character, real integrity, real empathy, that's what shows up when no one's watching. That's what survives the discomfort of accountability. So when someone's behavior leaves you confused, when their words don't line up with their actions, pay attention. Even if they're charming, especially if they're charming. That's the thing about emotional manipulation. It doesn't always come with red flags. Sometimes it comes with compliments. Sometimes it comes with a smile. Sometimes it comes wrapped in everything you've ever wanted to hear. And it's okay to admit that you got swept up in that. What matters is what you do once you see it clearly. Clarity is the beginning of freedom. And to relate it with something incredibly disorienting about trying to have a healthy relationship with someone who constantly turns your pain into their spotlights. You're standing there vulnerable, open, trying to express how something made you feel. And somehow, before you even finish your sentence, the conversation has flipped. Suddenly, it's not about you anymore. It's about how hurt they are, how difficult this is for them, how they just can't believe you would accuse them or say that or feel that way. And you're left sitting there wondering if maybe you're the one who messed up. Again, this is one of the most insidious traits of the female narcissist, emotional manipulation through victimhood. It's not always loud, it's not always explosive. In fact, more often than not, it's subtle, quiet, measured, but it is devastatingly effective. Because when someone uses your empathy against you, it's not just confusing, it's paralyzing. Female narcissists are often incredibly skilled at positioning themselves as the one who's been wronged. They know how to cry on cue, how to tremble just enough to seem fragile, how to make their pain more visible than yours. And here's what makes it so hard. It looks real, it feels real, and part of it is real. Because she believes her story. That's the part that breaks people. She's not pretending to feel hurt. She feels hurt. But the hurt is usually rooted in her ego, not in her heart. What she's reacting to isn't your unkindness, it's your challenge to her control. So you bring up a concern, and instead of accountability, you get deflection, you get accusations, you get silence, or you get tears and a story about how hard her life is, how nobody ever understands her, how much she's done for everyone. And before you know it, you're the one apologizing, you're the one consoling her. That's not conflict resolution, that's emotional manipulation. And let me tell you, it doesn't just happen in romantic relationships. It shows up between mothers and daughters, between friends, even in workplaces. Maybe you've had a friend like this. Every time you tried to set a boundary, she made it into a betrayal. Every time you got excited about something, she found a way to dampen it or redirect the attention. But the moment you tried to talk about how that made you feel, she'd break down or pull away or accuse you of being dramatic. And instead of repairing the relationship, you ended up managing her emotion, right? Because that's what you end up doing with a female narcissist. You manage her. You walk on eggshells. You weigh every word. You think 3 steps ahead just to avoid setting her off. And it's exhausting. But more than that, it's confusing because on the surface, she still looks like the victim. And you, with your frustration, your anger, your sadness, you start to look like the problem. That's the power of weaponized victimhood. It flips the dynamic. It casts the narcissist as a misunderstood, wounded heroine, and anyone who sees through it as cold, cruel, or unsupportive. And here's the heartbreaking part. This pattern doesn't just distort your relationship with her, it distorts your relationship with yourself. It trains you to mistrust your instincts, to override your own emotional reality, to confuse manipulation for connection. And if you've been there, you know it takes time to untangle all of that, because even after the relationship ends, the voice in your head might still whisper, maybe I was too harsh. Maybe I could have tried harder. Maybe it really was my fault. That voice isn't your intuition. That voice is the residue of someone else's discomfort. The truth is, healthy relationships can hold discomfort. They can hold honesty, accountability, even conflict. But manipulation dressed up as emotion doesn't lead to healing. It leads to confusion, self-doubt, and emotional erosion. And when someone consistently turns every moment of vulnerability into a performance, when they hijack your pain to center themselves, it's not connection, it's control. So if you find yourself constantly questioning your reality in the presence of someone who always seems to be the victim, even when they're clearly causing harm, it's okay to pause, to step back, to ask yourself if this is really mutual or if you're carrying the entire emotional weight of the relationship just to keep the peace. Because real empathy doesn't demand silence. Real empathy doesn't guilt you into staying small. Real empathy doesn't weaponize your heart against you. And knowing that changes everything. It's easy to think that someone who's obsessed with their image is just vain or shallow, that they care a little too much about how they look, what they wear, or what people think of them. But when you're dealing with a female narcissist, that obsession with image runs much deeper than vanity. It's not just about appearances. It's about control. Control over how she's seen, how she's understood, and most importantly, how she's treated. Female narcissists are often masters of curating a persona. She might present as the perfect mom, the inspirational boss, the humble survivor, the endlessly giving friend, but none of those identities are about being known. They're about being admired. There's a difference. Because being known means being vulnerable. Being admired means staying on top, and that's the goal. Control the narrative at all costs, even if it means disconnecting from who she really is. And one of the most powerful tools for doing that today, social media. It gives her the perfect stage to build and maintain a carefully crafted identity. The captions are thoughtful, the photos are filtered just right, the stories are emotional, often laced with hardship and triumph, designed to provoke admiration and sympathy. But when you look closer, when you actually know her in real life, you start to feel the disconnect, because behind the scenes, the compassion she preaches isn't there. The humility is performative, the kindness is selective, and the moment she's not in the spotlight, the energy shifts. And that's the thing about image-obsessed narcissism. It's not just about how she looks, it's about how she wants to be seen. She wants to be the one others envy. She wants to be the one people talk about, root for, feel inspired by. And if something threatens that image, if someone dares to suggest she's not as perfect as she seems, the reaction can be intense, defensive, sometimes even cruel. She might cut that person out, discredit them, or twist the story until she's the one who's been wronged, because the illusion must be protected. That curated image isn't just a preference, it's a shield. It keeps people from seeing the insecurity underneath, the fear of not being special, of not being adored. And the more fragile her ego is, the more aggressive she'll be in defending the persona she's built. And here's what makes it even more complex. It's not always easy to call out, because this kind of narcissism can look like confidence, it can look like ambition, self-care, even empowerment, but it's hollow, it doesn't connect, it doesn't nurture, it demands attention without offering depth. And over time, if you're close to someone like this, you start to feel invisible, not because she ignores you outright, but because your role in her life is to reflect back the image she's trying to maintain. You become part of the performance, whether you mean to or not. You're the friend who supports her no matter what, the partner who claps from the sidelines, the family member who's expected to never question her. And if you do, if you dare to speak up about the difference between who she is privately and who she is publicly, you'll likely find yourself painted as jealous, bitter, unstable, or disloyal. You'll spin it so convincingly that even you might question your motives. It's a trap that leaves people silenced, because no one wants to be the one who brings down the woman who looks like she has it all together. No one wants to be the villain in someone else's hero story. And so people stay quiet. They suppress their truth to keep the peace, to protect the image. But here's the cost. Your silence doesn't just protect her, it erodes you. It teaches you that what's real doesn't matter as much as what looks good. And that's the message a female narcissist thrives on: appearance over authenticity, admiration over accountability. But the truth is, relationships can't survive on a highlight reel. They need honesty. They need depth. They need the kind of connection that doesn't vanish the second the camera's off or the praise stops rolling in. So if you've ever felt like you were being used as a prop in someone else's performance, if you've ever felt like your purpose was to serve someone else's narrative instead of being seen for who you are, you're not imagining it. And you're not asking for too much by wanting something real, because being seen is not the same as being watched. There's something deeply painful about realizing someone you thought was your biggest supporter is actually in silent competition with you. At first, you don't even see it. It's disguised as concern or jokes or harmless teasing. You're doing well. You're proud of something. And then there's a comment, a dig, a shift in energy. You brush it off because, well, it's your friend or your sister or your coworker. But over time, the pattern gets harder to ignore. This is where female narcissism gets especially complex because it's not always explosive. It's often quiet, strategic. It shows up in how she celebrates you in public but critiques you in private, how she offers compliments with sharp edges, how she always finds a way to be just one step ahead or make sure you're one step behind. Female narcissists tend to view relationships as a hierarchy, not a partnership. Someone has to be on top, and she's determined to make sure it's her. That might not mean dominating every conversation or grabbing every spotlight, but it does mean subtly undermining anyone who threatens her sense of superiority, especially other women, especially women she sees as smart, capable, confident, or attractive. To her, those aren't friends. Those are rivals. She'll compete over everything: attention, admiration, opportunities. And what makes it even more confusing is that the competition is often hidden under a layer of sweetness or just trying to help. Maybe she gives advice that actually discourages you. Maybe she forgets to share opportunities. Maybe she shares your personal struggles at the worst possible moment, always under the guise of concern. And if you confront her, she'll act surprised, hurt even. I was just trying to help. I didn't mean anything by it. That's the manipulation. It's not just the behavior. It's the plausible deniability. It's how easily she spins her sabotage into something innocent. She gets to be the supportive friend and the silent rival at the same time. And you end up feeling like you're losing your mind, like maybe you're overreacting, like maybe it really is your own insecurity. Because who competes with their friends, right? But here's the truth. When someone is insecure at their core, they don't see your success as inspiring. They see it as threatening. Your joy reminds them of what they feel they lack. Your growth shines a light on where they feel stuck. And instead of dealing with those feelings honestly, they turn it outward into comparison, into subtle sabotage, into judgment. And it's never about just one moment. It's the accumulation. It's the pattern. You start to realize that every time you're doing well, she distances herself or finds a way to make it about her or brings up something that makes you question yourself. You get the sense that she's only comfortable when you're a little smaller, a little unsure, a little off balance. And that's not friendship. That's not love. That's control. And what makes this kind of dynamic so hard to navigate is the pressure women often feel to be nice, to avoid confrontation, to keep the peace. So we stay quiet. We rationalize. We convince ourselves that we're imagining it. But deep down, we know when we're being diminished. We know when someone is more interested in outshining us than in truly seeing us. So maybe it starts with acknowledging that not every smile is sincere. Not every cheer is real. And that doesn't make you cynical. It makes you awake. It gives you the space to discern, to trust your gut when something feels off, even if the words being said sound supportive. It lets you recognize that healthy relationships aren't built on comparison or power plays. They're built on mutual respect, genuine celebration, and a shared sense of safety. You shouldn't have to shrink so someone else can feel tall. You shouldn't have to downplay your success to keep a friendship intact. You shouldn't have to second guess your joy. And when someone consistently responds to your light by trying to dim it, that's not about you. That's about their wound, their need, their fear. You are allowed to want relationships where success isn't a threat, where confidence isn't a competition, and where love isn't conditional on you staying small, because you deserve to rise without apology. One of the hardest things to wrap your head around is how someone can demand your loyalty, your time, your emotional energy, yet give back so little in return. It's like being in a relationship where you're always on call, always the one giving, adjusting, showing up. But when you need something, crickets, excuses, deflection, or worse, guilt, because somehow even your needs become a burden to them. Female narcissists are experts at creating emotional dependence, but only on their terms. You become the listener, the fixer, the cheerleader, the emotional caretaker. You're the one holding space for her problems, her stories, her breakdowns. And you do it because that's what you think healthy connection looks like. You believe in being there for the people you care about. But slowly, you start to notice that the same space isn't held for you. When you're struggling, she's unavailable. When you're hurt, she's defensive. When you try to share something vulnerable, she redirects it or uses it later. And the message you start to absorb, whether she says it outright or not, is you're too much, you're too needy. You're making a big deal out of nothing. That message seeps in deep. You learn to downplay your feelings. You stop asking for support. You tell yourself she's going through a lot, or that maybe you're just not communicating well. But the truth is, she's not interested in a mutual relationship. She's interested in attention, control, and emotional service. And when you stop providing that, when you pull back even just a little, the shift is immediate. The warmth disappears. The closeness evaporates. Suddenly, you're being ignored or subtly punished or made to feel like the problem. And that's the hook, because now you're working even harder to get back to that connection you had at the beginning. You're chasing the version of her who made you feel so seen. But that version was never sustainable. It was a mask. Expect the cycle, idealize, devalue, discard. And it leaves you in a constant state of confusion. You start every interaction wondering which version of her you'll get today. You try to predict what mood she'll be in, how to keep the peace, how to stay close without asking for too much. And in the process, you slowly disconnect from your own needs. You become so focused on managing the relationship that you forget how to just be in it. This dynamic doesn't just damage your sense of self, it rewrites the story you tell yourself about what love is supposed to feel like. It teaches you that love is conditional, that connection means proving your worth, suppressing your needs, earning your place. And the longer you stay in that pattern, the harder it is to see it for what it really is: emotional imbalance masked as intimacy. And let me be clear, this isn't about perfection. Every relationship goes through seasons where one person needs more than the other. But in a healthy relationship, there's a return, there's a rhythm, there's space for both people to show up fully. With a female narcissist, that rhythm doesn't exist. It's always tilted in her favor. And if you don't comply, she'll find ways to punish you through distance, blame, or by painting you as the one who can't be pleased. That's why so many people walk away from these relationships exhausted, but also filled with guilt, because narcissistic women are skilled at making others feel like the problem. They don't yell. They don't always manipulate with obvious threats. They do it with silence, with subtle withdrawal, with shifting narratives. And by the time you realize what's happening, your self-worth has already taken a beating. But here's the truth. Needing support, needing emotional presence, needing reciprocity, that's not weakness. That's not being too much. That's being human. And you are allowed to want relationships that don't drain you, that don't leave you constantly explaining your feelings or apologizing for having them, because love without mutuality is not love. It's servitude dressed up as connection.